All right, 1 Samuel chapter 22. David, he leaves Gath, thankfully. He acted like an insane person to get out of there. He flees to a cave. Philistines didn't want a madman around, and David goes to Moab to get safety for his family. And maybe he had connections there because he had an ancestor who was from Moab, Ruth. But God directs David back to the territory of Judah. Meanwhile, we read the outcome of Saul's servant seeing David at the town of Nob. Saul learned that the priests there helped David, and he orders their execution. Saul's soldiers, they refuse the order. I gotta say, I like those soldiers. But the servant here, he sees an opportunity to gain favor with the king, and he executes priests. It's just a sad comment that we can be tempted by access to power. We can be tempted by, I want to be in good with those who are in charge. And so I'm willing to compromise. I'm willing to do something that is wrong. Often it's not quite as egregious as killing a bunch of people. But, well, we've seen recently some examples just within the church of people who wanted access to power, people who wanted to be in good, and they compromised their principles or they compromised in their practice just so that they could have access to power. One priest does make it out alive. He finds and then joins David. And this massacre, though, at Nob kind of basically ends the line of Eli, going back to the beginning of this book of Samuel. And so Eli's clan, Eli and his family as high priest, this is pretty much done now. Again, Samuel was not the high priest, remember. So God, we see here, God is faithful at fulfilling his promises. But they don't always happen right away. Samuel had told Eli that the line was going to be done many, many years ago. One thing to note here is the difference between Saul and David towards what happened at Nob. Saul, he condemns the priests for doing good, whether or not they were complicit. I mean, they were blessing David, especially if they had been deceived. We kind of talked about yesterday. If they were deceived by David, they were just doing what they thought was the right thing to do and helping Saul. Saul doesn't care. You helped an enemy knowingly, unknowingly, don't care. He kills them. And he doesn't take any responsibility for it. David, on the other hand, when he hears the news, he takes the blame upon himself. He takes responsibility. I saw that servant of Saul. I knew this guy's no good. I should have done something different. I should have known or had that thought and I didn't act on it. And he takes responsibility. Was David responsible? Again, you could argue maybe he had some measure of responsibility. Didn't matter to David. If there's anything that he might have been a part of that, he's here taking responsibility because David's heart is towards God. And here he sees some people harmed, killed in this case. Saul, his heart is just hard against God. And so to those made in God's image, his heart is hard as well. Another thing that's here and this is a theme that just runs through the scripture. I mentioned this already in a previous devotional. Here we see Saul kind of surrounded by powerful and wealthy. David's on the run, marginalized. And who is God with? James 2:5. Has God not chosen those who are poor in the eyes of the world to be rich in faith and to inherit the kingdom he promised to those who love him? 1 Corinthians, I mentioned this phrasing before. God chose the foolish to shame the wise, the weak to shame the strong. Why do I mention this? It's just this thought. Sometimes we all too easily forget whose empowering we need. We don't need the influence of the powerful, the elite, the wealthy to see God's kingdom grow. We don't need the empowering of the world around us for God's church to flourish. We need the empowering of the Spirit. We need the empowering of God. And so that's to be our focus, as we see so often it was David's focus as well. It's not sword or spear that will save, it's the Lord. David's words, again, 1 Samuel 17:47. Again, just encourage you to just connect to the empowering of the Spirit. Seek ways to walk in step with the Spirit. And a simple way is just putting ourselves in places where we listen to God, we trust what He's saying, and we obey. And we do that best in community. Because sometimes our listening isn't so good. We don't discern that well, or we need encouragement to trust and to step out in faith. And it's always good to be walking alongside brothers and sisters as we follow in the steps of Jesus. As you do that today, may the Lord bless you and keep you. May the Lord make His face to shine upon you. May the Lord be gracious to you. And today, would you know His peace? God bless.